I know now if you tell me, well, you shouldn't be upset if you own a semi-automatic rifle, they're never going to come and take it. That's a lie. I mean, I know that's a lie because they've done it to me already. And they've done it to him. I've watched them do it to fellow brother law enforcement officers.
The Gun Control Act of 1968 declared the BATF should fight against crime and violence. But in their fight, the BATF should not place undue burdens on law-abiding citizens. Congress was very specific. Private ownership of guns should not be discouraged in any way. So the BATF's original goal was, first, fight crime and violence, and second, collect revenue from legal alcohol and tobacco. From the beginning, the BATF kept law and order. But in the last 20 years, BATF lost sight of their goal. There's a new victim in America, a victim suffering unrightable wrong. The victim is the law-abiding American citizen, and dozens of them have had their private lives destroyed by forces they say are out of control. The victims warn the problem is not going away, and surprisingly, it's our own government perpetrating the crime. So when did the BATF lose sight of their goal, and why did they start targeting innocent American citizens? Because there are a lot of people today that are charging the BATF with incompetence. They are also charging them with cowardice for not seeking out the professional criminal, but taking the easy way out and making the easiest arrests. And it's those innocent people that might not be able to fight back. But the BATF's easy target quota system of crime fighting could be backfiring. Dozens of cases are being thrown out of court or being dismissed for lack of evidence or faulty evidence. Other alleged cases are merely forgotten as if they never existed, but not before ruining the lives of those under the gun.
I mean, we're not criminals. We didn't do anything wrong. We didn't steal the guns. We went and got permits through the police department, through Camden.
Bob Kirkbride and his partner Jim Phillips are veteran New Jersey cops. Together, they have survived a combined total of more than 38 years in life-threatening tactical work. Both are instructors qualified on arsenal weapons, including machine guns. Phillips is an expert in clandestine weaponry. On their beat in one of Camden, New Jersey's more dangerous ghettos, they have been the target of desperados of all kinds. But recently, they became targets of yet another kind. It was a desperate federal investigation. The agency responsible, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. After checking with their own police department for the appropriate permits, the tactical partners bought 2 semi-automatic Avenger firearms as collector's items. That is, until the BATF decided to collect the guns instead.
He said he was Agent Markovich from the BATF agency, and he wanted to speak to me about the weapon I had purchased.
He said, well, we need to evaluate it, and after we declare it's a machine gun, don't worry, you're not going to get arrested. I said, wait a minute, it's not a machine gun. What do you mean, how are you going to declare it is a machine gun when it doesn't fire automatically? Then he got mad. He said, whoa, I said, let's stop right here. I said, let's stop. And he reaches in his pocket and pulls out the Miranda warnings, and he proceeds to Mirandize us. He says, now, I want to ask you about these guns. I said, no. You're not asking me nothing. I'm not saying nothing. I want an attorney. He said, well, you don't have to take that kind of an attitude. He said, the only reason I gave you your Miranda warnings was because my bosses told me that's what we're supposed to do. I said, hey, wait a minute. We're both cops. We're not rookies. When we give somebody their Miranda rights, pal, you're in hot water. You're in trouble. I said, that's no joke to me.
The reason we had bought them was that we weren't going to fire them. They were consecutive serial numbers, low serial numbers. And anybody in their right mind doesn't buy a .45 caliber weapon to go out and blow around. It's just too expensive. So we thought it was a good idea to hold on to them.
The federal agent left with the 2 Avengers and began a massive investigation of the 2 officers. The BATF probed into their personal lives, their finances, their lifestyles, trying to dig up any dirt on the partners he could, while all the time continuing to work with them side by side on other undercover Camden, New Jersey cases.
I mean, I got pretty hot under the collar at his attitude at one point, and I said, well, I'm going to talk to an attorney. He said, well, wait a minute. I want to know who your attorneys are.
Yeah.
I said, I'm not telling you who my attorney is. He said, you're going to tell me who the attorney is, because if not, you could be construed as hindering a federal prosecution and be charged for it. because we want to make sure you're not going to see attorneys that Spadia from Jersey Arms Works or Longo from the Weapons Emporium are using them, so you have to get our permission. I said, what do you mean I have to get your permission to use an attorney of my choosing?
He said you make up a list and he'll okay it.
Yeah, make up a list. He said, make up a list and my bosses will okay it. I said, where's this at? The Gulag Archipelago or something? You know, this is America, not Russia. This guy thought he was in the, the Gestapo from Washington, D.C. or something. I mean, that really upset me.
We'd heard that the BATF was bad guys, untrained bunch of political hacks, so we figured that, the bad guys are saying that. It's like you lock up a guy and he comes in and says you beat him up. It's a way out. They look for a way out. Now, we figured the BATF was doing their job and these people were just sour grapes. But now that you see it, now that it happens to you, you be a little more sensitive and you can see that these guys, the way they work, they don't work right, they don't work properly.
It turned out to be an expensive witch hunt for the government and a painful experience for two good cops and their families. Not one indictment or charge was ever brought by the BATF. And after all the trauma they imposed, the BATF dropped the investigation like a hot shell casing.
My envisions of ATF is, you're going after guys with hand grenades and terrorists and machine guns and, bad guys. Bad guys. That's my interpretation. Now, I know better. They hit some gun shows, but I really know better now. I know now if you tell me, well, you shouldn't be upset if you own a semi-automatic rifle, they're never going to come and take it. That's a lie.
If we wanted one, we'd just confiscate one. Just take one. I mean, what's a drug dealer going to go in there and tell the chief of police they took my machine gun, now I want them locked up? He's going to be happy we just took that. So why would I go out and purchase something, pay money for it, and it be illegal? It just doesn't make any sense. But even at that, the part that upset me is these guys snuck in there as an agency. Let's be brothers, let's talk, you help us, we might be able to help you. And the first opportunity they got, they shafted us.
When did the BATF decide to target non-criminals? By the BATF's own admission, their primary goal is to find the bad guys, not the average citizen. The intent is to keep guns out of the hands of felons, drug dealers, and common criminals.
First and foremost is a felon possessing a firearm, and we also have a recently enacted law called the Armed Career Criminal Act, which provides for a 15-year mandatory prison term for a person who has 3 felony convictions for violent felonies or serious drug offenses and is found in possession of a firearm.
Each year, thousands of private citizens attend gun shows, either to buy or sell weapons. These are private citizens that don't need a license to trade, buy, and sell. It's the beauty of a gun show, a place where collectors who are building a collection can work at their hobby. Gun shows were originally designed just for the hobbyist, but in 1984, the BATF relaxed the rules for gun shows and allowed dealers with FFL licenses to also attend. As long as the dealers keep the appropriate paperwork and abide by all the rules of their license, they too can buy, sell, and trade at gun shows. This is Jim Bossy. Bossy is a prosperous Northern California businessman. He made most of his money in real estate and bought a failing gun dealership from a friend a few years ago. Bossy is a licensed dealer and sells most of his guns to police, including machine guns. Looking for an easy target, Bossy alleges the BATF sneaked onto his property without a warrant, diagrammed his house, his gun shop, and gun locker, and then tried to get him in their sights.
They came up here and seized 300 weapons. And out of all those weapons, the one that they were really concerned about was the shotgun that was too short. It wasn't being used in a crime. It wasn't loaded with a live round. It wasn't in the back of some guy's car lurking around a liquor store. It had been here for years. I'm 40 years old and never had a problem before. I'm a responsible businessman and entrepreneur in the community, lived here all my life. There's no intent to commit a crime. I don't need to commit a crime. I'm well off financially. I don't need to go down and rob a liquor store to feed my wife or anything else. What they really should have done is they should have given me an administrative slap on the hand, is what they normally do, and seized the weapon. And, you know, I did a boo-boo. I didn't pay the tax. One of the real serious problems with the gun business and trying to deal with guns or even owning a gun as a private citizen, is there are so many restrictions and so many laws and so many gray areas that nobody really knows what's going on anymore. In calling ATF to ask Mike Badisco or any of these people what is legal and what is not, what can I and can I not do, they don't know. They're in the business to know what they're supposed to be doing, and when you call them, they cannot give you an answer over the phone. They have to go check with somebody else. Now, how can I run a business if I don't even know what I'm supposed to be doing? They expect me to know all the laws, all the regulations, everything, right to the deal. And they're changing laws and regulations, I mean, daily. And we don't know about it for months after the law is changed.
One of the agents who testified against Bossie was heard to say, anyone who had as much money as Bossie must be making a fortune in illegal weapons. And with that, they proceeded with their case.
They spent literally thousands and thousands. I've spent over $100,000 on this deal, myself, personally, out of my pocket. Not to mention the loss of time that I've spent. I've been messing around with this for 2.5 years. And when you're under this type of investigation, you can't function. You have trouble eating, going to the bathroom, just doing normal things because you are so stressed out. The money that the government wasted, I mean literally wasted, trying to make me a criminal, and I say trying to make me a criminal because I am not a criminal, is just appalling. You know, they talk about tax budgets and problems with money. I know what their problem is money. It's bad management.
Why is this strong government agency taking such a tyrannical line against defenseless, innocent citizens? The BATF is accused of taking their padded quota sheets with long lists of arrests to Congress to justify spending $166 million taxpayer dollars every year to pay for the upkeep of their bureaucracy. The BATF is accused of promoting agents who make numerous arrests, thereby encouraging quantity over quality and throwing control and supervision out the window. Is the BATF a police agency run amok? Is it full of agents who are chasing innocent paperwork mistakes rather than vicious criminals? Robert Sanders is a former BATF official. He has held every position of authority in the BATF from agent to chief of enforcement. Now an attorney in Washington, D.C., Sanders specializes in defending gun owners from the BATF.
If an agent were to go to a gun show, he could see what might look like suspicious activity all around him, but which may not be. So therefore, the protections were promulgated within ATF, and therein are the checks and balances from supervision and from management. But turning it around and going after a law enforcement officer or any other citizen for technical, non-willful violations is just not a matter of federal interest. And it's something that, that ATF's own policies and procedures dictate against. Go after criminal activity, and criminal activity is not hard to discern. Criminal activity, we know it when we see it.
Now, clearly there was tampering in some of the BATF cases, and the judge in the Bossie case rendered that in his opinion, so he more or less confirmed it. Now, as a former official of BATF, were you ever aware of tampering, or was it ever condoned?
It's hard to even comment on something like that. It's so inherently evil and wrong, just common sense and gut feeling. Evidence is something you don't tamper with.
The case against the BATF continues to grow as their quota file grows. Reckless disregard for the law, BATF extortion, BATF perjury, BATF illegal and false searches, and BATF entrapment. One of those recently entrapped, Richard Johnson. Johnson, the son of a police chief, began collecting guns as a 16-year-old boy. After his tour of duty in Vietnam, Johnson obtained a dealer's license and started collecting semi-automatic firearms and parts for his collection. Johnson enjoyed working with guns and occasionally sold or gave extra parts away at gun shows until, he says, he was set up. But the BATF charges against him backfired in court, especially after a secret recording made by the undercover agent was played.
There was over 56 instances on the tapes
where I had actually said, I am not going to break the law for you. I will not do anything illegal. I told him to get federal paperwork, to execute that paperwork, to wait for approval. The entire case was permeated with machine guns and conversion kits. Why was Richard Johnson selling these kits? Well, as I'd already mentioned, I'd called up their offices in Tampa and the technology branch in D.C. and was told by their most eminent authorities that these parts were legal to possess, to trade, and to sell. As a matter of fact, none of these parts were covered by the Gun Control Act of 1968. Nevertheless, the trial was focusing about 80% on those parts and that drop-in sear that I'd sold, and about 20% on the actual rifles that I'd sold. It seems that the rifles were the reason to bring me into the courtroom, and the parts were the thing that they were really trying to stress when they were there.
The jury acquitted Johnson, and once again, the BATF was red-faced.
When the case was over, immediately the marshals, several of the marshals came up and shook my hand, and the one marshal, I won't even mention his name, but the one marshal, one of the older marshals that have been there, he's retired now, tells you how long he's been there, came over and shook my hand and said, you know, this case has been about nothing more than the right to keep and bear arms. He says, I'm glad you won, son.
Some say it sure would be nice if the BATF leaned on outlaws the way they lean on good guys. They came down hard on John Lovin from out of nowhere. John is an enthusiast who knows guns, ammo, and hunting. He and his family operated a successful roadside fruit stand until friends and customers suggested they expand their gun hobby into a full-time business. So he obtained his license and was soon known as the guy who stayed open on New Year's Day and might even open up for a hunter at midnight. If the local police department needed some special ammo, John was there to help. He and his family became one of the largest gun dealers in Pennsylvania until the BATF pulled his license for no apparent reason. John was out of business overnight.
With the BATF, it seems to be quite a bit of confusion. Not only can they not tell you what the policy is, or even what the law is exactly. You try to get hold of Washington, it's worse yet. It's no answer whatsoever.
The BATF spent 3 months looking for something to hang Lovin on. All they could find was a mistake in recording a serial number. A 2 should have been a 3. Was he trying to get a handgun into the hands of a criminal? No, the gun was sold to a police officer. Another BATF blunder, not based on conclusive evidence.
Well, from what I can see of the situation, the problems we've had with the BATF, that the professionalism just isn't there as far as being able to tell what the policy is or to give us information. I haven't had any problems with any of the individuals personally, but it seems the group put together from the membership puts out a very poor public image and doesn't really seem to get the job done.
We've already learned real criminals are not the only ones targeted. Law enforcement officers come under just as much scrutiny as the average citizen. Take Lieutenant Jim Corcoran of the Pennsylvania State Police, a model cop, family man, and citizen in every way. Someone reported Jim for selling an automatic weapon.
The charges were always, it seemed to me, questionable. I mean, you always had to stretch a point, even under their reading of the law, to make it a machine gun. You had to take it apart, you had to put a part in backwards, etc. You always had to stretch it. What surprised me is that they went so far against a guy like Corcoran, who was a state trooper, had an absolutely exemplary record for 17 years in the state police.
So when did the judge intervene, and what was the judge's main reason for throwing the case out of court?
81-4 says that, almost verbatim, an AR-15 manufactured with M16 internal parts already installed is converted into a machine gun by the addition of an automatic sear. And that implies that an AR-15 with M16 internal parts already added, which doesn't have an automatic sear, is not a machine gun.
Corcoran was lucky. He was exonerated, reinstated, and promoted. Yet he's out more than $40,000 defending his innocence.
So I'm telling you folks, if you got a shotgun and you go out and you shoot a bunny, and when you shoot a bunny, your semi-automatic fires 2 times, I don't know what you do, because you now possess a machine gun, if the ATF is right, and there's no reason they couldn't thereafter prosecute you like they prosecuted Jim Corcoran. Crazy though it seems to me anyway.
Don Breyer is another firearms hobbyist and collector who suddenly found himself in the BATF quota file. The charge? Selling firearms without a license at a gun show. An undercover agent purchased 2 guns from Breyer at 2 different shows and said Breyer had sold 2 other guns elsewhere. Again, it's the little guy against the government.
The game has really changed. It's no longer the crooks versus the honest people. It's the game of what the government agency is allowed to do. If they're allowed to lie to the grand jury and obtain indictments, then they can lie at trial. And to them, it's just a matter of a conviction game. They don't consider the effect to the individual, to society in general, to the family, to the children, to the friends, to all the other people that suffer. They just basically look at this whole situation as a conviction mill. And they're really taking honest individuals and turning them into criminals. The power of the government is oppressive. No one can afford to fight the government. I know that now. It just ruins you financially, it ruins you emotionally, it ruins your family life, it ruins every aspect of your life, business or whatever. You cannot fight the government. And the government agents know this.
After more than $30,000 in attorney's fees, the federal judge handling the case in Los Angeles blocked expert testimony from GOA and sentenced Breyer to prison, probation, and a fine. Breyer is appealing while the GOA continues to help.
Financially, it just about wiped me out. The first attorneys didn't really know what they were doing. They cost almost $15,000. The second attorney, handling it because the first attorney was failing so miserably, quoted me he would take it on for $4,000 or $5,000. In fact, put it in writing for $5,000 or $6,000. It ended up costing another $15,000, $20,000.
Finally, there are those who, whether guilty or not, can't take the pressure of an investigation. Big Brother is just too intimidating. They feel the little guy just can't win against the government. They don't have enough time and not enough resources. Take the case of Eddie Walters. Eddie was set up by an undercover agent.
There were 6 guys in my kitchen, and I walk in, and the first thing he says, "Do you have a gun?" And I said no, and I just stood there and I was looking around, and then one of the guys started explaining that he was from the government, and then Eddie walked in, but one time when I was in the kitchen, and Eddie was sitting across from one of the agents, and they were telling him, you know, "We've got you, man. There's no way out of this. We've got you, and there's nothing you can do about it. You might as well hang it up, bud." And it was just like, you know, and I was sitting on the kitchen counter, and I just started crying, and he looked over at me, and he said, "See what you've done to her? You've ruined her life." And, you know, and Eddie just looked at me, and that's all it took. As much as he loved me, that's all it took for him to have someone tell him that he ruined my life. It's more than he can handle. He said, I haven't done anything bad enough to go to jail over. He said, "There's no way." He said, "Do you see what that paper said? It said United States of America versus Eddie Walter." He said, "There's no way that I can fight the government." He said, "I could either run or I can kill myself." You know, I guess I was thinking if he did run, I didn't want to tell the police he was missing so they wouldn't find him. And then it was around 9:30 or 9:45, finally Friday night, that the police came to the door and told me that Eddie was dead, that they had found him.
Eddie's perception of letting his family down and the heavy hand of the BATF drove him to take his own life. Are these isolated cases? Certainly not. As you have seen, people from all across the nation were targeted for prosecution and fell victim to the abuses of the BATF. But there is an answer, and you can fight back. If we all join together, we can make sure that the BATF operates in its proper role, and that is by going after the criminal. BATF is not the only agency that's trying to take away our individual rights. They're just part of the overall problem. You're probably well aware of the orchestrated plan by anti-gunners whose new attack is on semi-automatic firearms using buzzwords like assault weapons. The anti-gun forces are persistent, well-financed, and entrenched. We must fight back. It's our American responsibility. We are Americans, We believe in our individual rights. We intend to keep those rights intact. Unfortunately, we've stood by and watched bureaucracy get too big and out of control. Now some of the attacks are coming out of that same bureaucracy. All over the United States, our Second Amendment rights are restricted and falling one by one. Semi-automatics could be next. Then perhaps the basic right to own any gun may be gone.
We all are in a crisis, that our liberties are in jeopardy. If we don't believe that, if we don't understand that, then there's no way we can take action. We have to not only get involved in talking to our friends and neighbors, we have to take some leadership. We have to get the facts to our friends and neighbors. We have to get them to our legislators and even to the media. We have to talk to these people and show them that there is another point of view that they haven't heard before, and we have to keep talking until they finally listen to us. And it's not going to necessarily be the first time that we contact them. We're going to have to be very persistent or we will lose.
The bureaucratic oppression perpetrated by the BATF reached deep into society. It pitted cop against cop in New Jersey when the BATF went after fellow law enforcement brothers Bob Kirkbride and Jim Phillips. They have been exonerated, but still have not seen their rifles returned. The oppression has cost Jim Bossy more than $100,000 in legal fees. He has lost forever part of his private collection that was not for sale. The BATF destroyed that part of the collection. Richard Johnson was acquitted, but his victory was expensive and painful. Don Breyer is still appealing his conviction for allegedly selling 5 guns at a gun show without a license. And don't forget about Eddie Walters. A man is presumed innocent until proven guilty, but Eddie couldn't handle the insinuation that he was guilty and killed himself because of the BATF's scare tactics. What can you do to stop the oppression? Help stop the anti-gun agenda of taking our guns one by one until they're all gone by joining Gun Owners of America. Once on our mailing list, we can provide you protection on all fronts. If you have questions, write. We're here to help. Show this story to others. Spread the word so more people can see what's happening. Be vigilant. If you own firearms or want to protect the rights of those who do, we must work together. This is our country. We must protect the liberties guaranteed to all of us in our Constitution. To do anything less is to renounce our heritage.
This is the United States. It's our country. We, American citizens, run it. We control the government, or else it gets out of hand and it becomes a bureaucracy. We believe that the BATF has become just that, a bureaucracy that's out of control. Now, there are good people in the BATF, we know that. But we know that they've also been involved in excesses that's caused a great deal of harm to American citizens. One of the reasons that we and gun owners were formed was to set up another organization that believes very strongly in the rights of all of us to keep and bear firearms. Now, why don't you become a member of our organization? You'll find that we're fighting for you, and we fought for other citizens, and we're very proud of that. And we're going to continue to fight for these things for years to come.
To ensure your liberty, mail your check to Gun Owners of America, Suite 102, 8001 Forbes Place, Springfield, Virginia, 22151.